Welcome. Today we're going to be looking at the intersections between family group conferencing and family dispute resolution and what we can do to get some of the benefits of the various practices across. Before I proceed any further, I'd like to acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of Australia and recognise their continued connection to land, waters and culture, and particularly to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging leaders. I come to you today from the lands of the Gunai Kurnai people in Victoria, in Gippsland, and Eve's co-facilitating with me. And Eve, what country are you on?
I'm on Bunjalung country, but Yugambeh people. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. And if you would like to use the chat to start introducing yourselves, where you are and what your interests in the topic are, there will be points where we're stopping to have a conversation, and we hope to have a good conversation during this session. So it's not meant to be just a brain dump. For anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Joanne Law. I'm Director of Mediation Institute and Family Dispute Resolution Practitioner, nationally accredited mediator, trainer. I have done the FGC training with Eve, but I haven't got any experience at all as a facilitator. Eve's going to be putting in a lot more of the insights from that side of thing. And Eve, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everybody. So I'll try to keep it really short because I'm a very long talker, but I have been doing family group conferencing, I think, since about 2011, and started with the pilot program for New South Wales DCJ, and then went on to continue to do it privately before the panel was formed and started to train. And then I also became a FDRP with Joanne. So then she knew I was doing the training of family group conferencing, and that's where we decided that was the perfect match to be able to offer it with the support of Mediation Institute. Yeah, I'm very passionate about family group conferencing. I've done, I would say, hundreds of family group conferences, and also during COVID, virtual conferences as well. I love it. I love the outcomes, and I love the self-determination that family group conferencing offers. So here to answer some questions and share some of my experiences when required. Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you. And yeah, please use the chat. We've got a fair group of people, so we won't spend the time at the moment to go right around the room with introductions, but please introduce yourself to the others, and particularly if you do have any experience with either FDR or FGC. So what we wanted to do was start with just a quick overview of what family dispute resolution practice is for anyone who's not aware, and also family group conferencing, and then we'll look at the opportunities and have some conversation around that. So this slide's just a little overview of the models, and I'll talk to the FDR first and then Eve can talk to the FGC. And with the FGC, I've just done a screen grab of the model that was provided in a report from DCJ on the presentation, but there's a couple of things that Eve, when she looked at, said, oh, but what about this and that? So with family dispute resolution, practitioners are registered family dispute resolution practitioners that are accredited through the Australian Attorney General's Department after doing training, and I've got a little bit more about that. It's either a fee-for-service or a government subsidised family relationship centres, Relationships Australia, that the practice goes through. It's usually the parents only, or maybe a parent and a grandparent, not as common yet to have wider family groups participating. It's one of the reasons I'm running this and some of the things, because I'd like to see some of those strengths from FGC perhaps supporting complex families in the FDR context. It's usually required. It's nominally voluntary but in the case of children, it's required before people can go to family court unless there's an exemption, and FDR practitioners are the only people that can issue the Section 60I certificate, which confirms that it's been attempted and unsuccessful, or hopefully successful, and there's no need for a certificate and there's no need for people to go to family court. It's mandatory that we do a pre-mediation assessment of the parties individually, and looking at history of family violence and other factors that may affect their ability to make an uncoerced decision to freely reach agreement, and the obligation is that we must not proceed if those conditions aren't there. It is a structured process, but it is still a facilitative process. So the family members that are present are the decision makers in FDR. If they reach an agreement, that agreement can be written down. If it's signed and dated, it becomes a parenting plan, and it has legal status. It can be used as evidence in court. The court has to consider the most recent parenting plan if they do end up eventually in court, but it's not in itself enforceable. And usually they'll have a clause about coming back to mediation if things change or if they need help with what it means. It's very, as I said, it's structured. There's no direct communication between the parties without the mediator present, and the children are normally not present. We'll talk a little bit about how the child's voice is heard later. But Eve, do you want to maybe just hand over to you for the distinctions around the FGC?
Thank you. It's nice to hear them side by side and really look at how can they overlap and intertwine. And this is something that Joanne and I have been talking about for quite a long time, because we believe that the two can work really well together. Yeah, when I had a look at this, which Joanne's got from the DCJ model, I did notice a few things missing, which I'll pick up on in a moment. I think even just the center there, that it's an evidence-based model with specific components, like that, to me, even that statement isn't the essence of family group conference. So to sit in the center is not really what it's about. It is evidence-based, and I think Joanne's got at the end of her slides one of the most recent reports as well, which is really interesting for you to go through and pick out some of those insights. But at the heart of family group conferencing really it's about self-determination. It's about that in the best interest of the children is that if families can be part of the decision-making process, that the best outcomes are going to come from that. So that's why family group conference was designed in the first place. So that's a very formal kind of statement in the center of a model, in a model where it's really about deformalizing, although there's still a system around and a framework how we go about doing this, which is required when we're working with obviously difficult situations, particularly within the child protection arena, and also when there's a large group of people. So it does bring a lot more complexities as well. So having a framework as a facilitator really helps. So if I just quickly go through around those, whatever that shape is, hexagon, is it? Voluntary. It is voluntary. Families do agree to participate, but I think we all know what voluntary means when you're in that child protection. But just knowing that this is the New South Wales model, DCJ model, which is widely used through a panel of providers. However, it is not the only way for it to be used. So it can be used, and I have been privately asked to come and do it for like youth services and different family services, out of home care services. But I think when you go through the training, you start to understand how we can balance out voluntary and to really make sure that we enter that as our practice in family group conferencing. I believe that we are the only ones that can uphold the integrity of things at times as practitioners. But if a family doesn't want to be part of this process, they do not need to be part of the process. Or if they don't agree to some of the guidelines around what they need to go in and plan around, then that family group conference wouldn't happen. So the family preparation, so this is the pre-mediation like we do in a FDR, but you're doing it as a facilitator with lots of family members. So it's not just with those two family members, and they have a big role in the whole preparation of it, down to where you're going to meet, what you're going to eat, talking about who's going to be there, many components where it absolutely wraps around the family, and they start that decision-making process there. They start the conversations with family members outside of what you actually talk about in an FDR. So it's quite different in that sense, that it's really family-led, and we encourage those conversations in preparation as well. So then we go around to family-centered. So it is very family-centered, but the big piece that's missing here is that child focused as well. So we have a lot of contact with children, and again, it's all age dependent and dependent on the ability for children to participate and at what level that is, of course. But it has a heavy emphasis on the child or children. And it's very strength-based as well. And that goes through all of our communication and all of our planning. And it's based on not just the strength of the parent, but the strength of the family as a whole and as individuals, and what role do they play in the child's life. So then we go into the casework support to implement the plan. Again, this is very DCJ model. So really the intent, and if that's required and if that's helpful and if it's what the family want, then that's great for them to have that support. But this is all based around the ideal that family and extended family and what that family see as family, that extended community, it might be church pastors, for example, that they play a role actually in the support of the rollout of the implementation of that plan. That if we can give that support and ownership back to the family to be that circle of safety and support, that's the ideal really for family group conferencing. But when we're looking at it in DCJ model, of course, there's casework often that's involved there. So they will base that off the plan. And the conference, it has 3 stages. So in that stage, I think the most important one for you to understand is that middle section after we have information sharing, that they go into family time and there is no facilitators present. And we go over all of these things because that's a really big shift from the model of FDR. So I think that can be the hardest thing to conceptualize, but that's where the magic happens. I've gone from the process of being taught originally that you were in there to over many years just absolutely in alignment that when you're not in there, that more magic happens, that family unite in a much better way, that you always shift those dynamics, no matter how much rapport you build with a family. And then the 3rd stage is them agreeing to the plan. So it is quite different in many ways. And the last piece is that they're independent facilitators. Again, how independent is someone that's getting paid and commissioned by the referrer as well? So there's some touchy points around that too, but I'm not going to get into that today. Thanks, Joanne.
That's wonderful, thank you. And I think you mentioned the meal time, and you're so used to that as being part of the process, you probably didn't think to draw it out, but just highlight the importance of that.
That's true. So that happens between the information sharing and the family time. So everybody does gather for the meal, and what that meal is also decided by the family in the preparation stage. Sometimes we've even had families that actually make that meal. So it's a very different setting and model and way to go about a dispute resolution process as opposed to the FDR. So there's so many lines thread through family group conferencing that is about connecting on many levels and reconnecting. And I know it might feel like, oh, this is maybe separated parents and this is a family coming together, so that makes sense. But some of these families, they make comments in the beginning, there is no way you're going to get all those people in the room, very similar to FDR, and people that have had extreme conflict prior to family group conferencing that still can create a plan together when we're focused on the children as the central point of this, because most people come for the children. Yeah, I do believe there is definitely components that can marry together there.
Wonderful, thank you, Eve. And just a reminder, if you have any questions popping up as we're going through, feel free to put your virtual hand up. We mightn't see your real hand, or use the chat and we'll try and get to those. But I've got a couple of slides that'll just go through each of the processes just with a little bit more detail for anyone who's not familiar. So the current form of family dispute resolution was established in 2006 amendments to the Family Law Act, and the regulations established in 2008, and there's been evolution and iterations over time since then. Basically, according to the Family Law Act, and if FDR is a process where the FDR practitioner helps people by separation or divorce to resolve some or all of their disputes with each other, or helps persons who may apply for a parenting order under Section 65C. So there might be grandparents or other family members if there's maybe one of the parents is dead, or there's other factors that are meaning the wider family, to resolve some or all of their disputes with each other relating to the care of children, and in which the practitioner is independent of all the parties involved in the process. The independence, as Eve mentioned, is interesting because we're getting a lot. There's a program being funded by the Attorney Generals for Aboriginal community controlled organisations and First Nations practitioners and deliver family dispute resolution services. And often they are part of the community and connected. So there's lots of conversations around how does that independence look in that context. So there's lots of nuances around this. The definition of the best interest of the child in the Family Law Act has just changed on the 6th of May, and it's become a lot easier to understand. It used to have 16 different factors and weighting and all sorts of things. So now, and I'm not going to read through it all, but the key priorities are first, safety, any views expressed by the child, their developmental, psychological, emotional and cultural needs, and how well the people that are proposing to have parental responsibility are able to meet those. The benefits for the child to have a relationship with their parents and other family members, or other people who are significant, actually. So it's not just family members. So it could be that a child has an intensely important relationship with a friend or something like that. That could be something that's raised and needs to be considered. And anything else relevant to particular circumstances with the child. And for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, there's an extra clause that really highlights the importance that anyone working in the family law sector needs to give to that support, opportunity, encouragement for them to connect with and maintain their connections with their family, their community, culture, country and language. So I suppose that's the frame that we work with within family dispute resolution and family law. However, even though the two views of the child are as a very clear priority in family dispute resolution, often it's only based on what the parents say are the children's views, if we even ask. And there's always a worry about how we frame that, because we don't want parents trying to lobby the children to say what they want them to say. So there's always that tension. And also child inclusive processes. So when a child inclusive process is used in family dispute resolution, it's usually a specialist that meets with the child, a child consultant, child inclusive practitioner. It is a confidential process, so they need to negotiate with the child what information they want brought back to the mediation, and then the consultant would attend part of the family dispute resolution session to share with the parents. There's a few different models. Sometimes it's done as a separate standalone session, and then another family dispute resolution mediation session scheduled, so giving parents time to kind of take in what's shared. It can be quite emotional. It's not a process where the practitioner is asking, oh, who do you want to live with, or asking the child to make the decisions for their parents, but it's really around their views, the impacts of the separation and so on. In the family court, the child will meet with a family consultant, maybe a couple of times, initially for a brief report, and then if it isn't resolved and they're going towards a trial, there'll be a more comprehensive process. And another change that's just come in is that if an independent children's lawyer is appointed, they now have to meet with the child and tell the court why they didn't, as long as the child's old enough. And old enough, it can depend. So it's probably primary school children, maybe a bit younger if there's other children, only if the child's willing. So it's always if the child is willing, but it will often mean the voice of the child's filtered through the perceptions of these adults that meet them, who are often very good at doing that, but it's not direct, normally wouldn't participate directly in FDR or family court processes. If you do with requirements, it's quite a high level requirement to be a family dispute resolution practitioner. It's a graduate diploma of family dispute resolution, so level 8 on the qualification framework, level higher than a degree, and or a core unit, so part of that plus a law, social work, psychology degree or accreditation as a mediator, and then registration with the Attorney General's Department. So you've got good character requirements and things like that. So people have to have a police check and working with children requirements. If I know often we might not be meeting with children. There is another model around where the practitioner does meet with the children, and I'm not sure if anyone here has been trained in that, but when we open the mic, it'd be great if you wanted to share your insights around that, if that is the case.
Joanne, I just realised I was thinking as you were saying this, I've never actually been asked by any of that by independent organisations. But I've never been asked for like my working with children check, my police checks.
Yeah.
Which is, not good because in FGC you're meeting and children. So
yes, that's right. So there's something from FDR that possibly could come across, because you're working with families that are very, that can be really quite vulnerable. And
the DCA model, to be a provider, you have to go through all of that process. But like independent, other services have never actually asked for it.
No, that's a great thing to pull out. If people are interested, you can find out more about the details of what's in the family dispute resolution training on our website. So Mediation Institute edu.au, and you can navigate to that. You don't have to remember all those. So we should have done a short thing, but we didn't. So family group conferencing, I might hand over to you, Eve, to just maybe give a little bit of a more insight on this, if that's okay.
I have to see what's on the slides, but
sorry.
I'd love to know in the chat as well. What would you like to know about family group conferencing? Would be great. But yes, it is a family-led decision-making process, which is what I spoke about before. And it's not just to assist authorities. There's lots of different ways that family group conferencing can be used, but it is the main practice. And it is also where it was, I guess, originated from, is that there was an overrepresentation of Maori children going into care over in New Zealand. And so there was a board of Indigenous Maori people who were brought together to create something that was going to follow all of the best practices of keeping connection to family, to culture, to land, and helping to use that extended family network and community to keep children safe. That's its original development. Australia was one of those first countries that did adopt it as well. And it's something that has been used in lots of different cultures. So we do need to also adapt it to the different cultures as well. So we really need to think about when we're using family group conferencing, because often it might be used in not just the Maori communities, but also Aboriginal, Torres Strait Island. There's a lot of, it might be in Sudanese, it might be in Chinese. It really depends what the referral is, and all these different cultures, we have to adapt to that, because this is very much based out of one particular, I guess, culture as well. So we're using that framework and we're adapting that.
I know with some of the training you've had people from British Columbia working with it, and
exactly. We've trained people from all around the globe as well, and they're then adapting that. And I think it's really important to look at it and take it to people that have the expertises in those different cultures as well, and the knowledge, and that they give those insights. So if I am facilitating, let's say for a Tongan family, then if I don't have knowledge in that culture and I haven't worked with that family before, but I've been asked to do a family group conference, then it might be that I go to a community leader there and just start to understand their culture as well. And then every family obviously is going to have their own, and that's what we already know in this work that we do. But family group conferencing, it is all about self-determination, and us as the practitioners are the ones that can help to implement that the best. By one of the most important things is not, I guess, making suggestions and things, that we really take a step back as family group conferencing and really let the family lead in that process, as opposed to FDR or mediation, where we are very much trying to direct everything based on a framework. We really take more of a step back here. the principles of FGC. The child's interests are paramount, so we have different ways of including children. So we might have direct contact with children. Even if it's a really young child, I like to understand the child so that I can use their name and say, hey, Tommy loves trains. I saw that when I met him. It just continues to keep the child paramount to everything that you're doing. And that's what family group conferencing is all about. And that we look at how can we have their voice heard throughout that. So it might be also including external, it might be youth workers, it might be like someone that they work really closely with at the school. And we start to gather those voices from the people that they are close with and are working a lot. So it's not just that if it's a young child, we can involve them in many different ways. And that's what I love about family group conferencing as well. And yeah. I think that's about it.
Yeah. No, that's no worries. Thanks, Eve. And there was a question about the training to become, I think I've got a slide about that. It is often used in the child protection context. I just was doing a little bit of research. There's some really good data from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. So I've drawn these out. 2022 is the most current data they had.
And I think like family group conferencing mixed with intensive family support services, perfect combination. And I used to be an intensive family preservation worker actually years ago. And I used to try to create a family plan based on my FGC skills as well with the family. And I would try to include those other family members. And I think this model and frameworks and principles of it can be utilized really well if they've got the support that they require to help implement it. But then those family support services are helping a family to implement a plan that's been devised in a very family inclusive, child focused and self-determination way, rather than just sitting down with the two parents and coming up with a sort of case plan. They actually work and support off something that I think is the best way that a plan can be made for family and children.
Absolutely. So I've also pulled out a little bit of data about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, and apologies for the contraction there. It's which has been done for convenience of the slides. But yeah, one of the real things that most of us working in this area know, there's a really heavily overrepresentation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in out-of-home care and care and protection orders. And a lot of this work is occurring in that context. But the numbers are really 57,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children compared to 4.8 of non-Indigenous children in out-of-home care. So there's still a lot of opportunities for more family involvement. Often, if they're not involved, they don't even know where family members are, whereas in family group conferencing, maybe that's part of something you talk to about it as well, Eve, how you work out who family is when you're putting together a conference.
Yeah. Good question. It's actually fairly simple. We just ask the family and who they identify as family to be. And of course, we talk to everyone as well because, yeah, we talk to workers, we talk to family members, and we try to do our best to work that out and get as much of the contacts and details as possible. But it really can involve, there might be mum's best friend at the conference, there might be all of the cousins is usually what the children request as their support that they want there. It's not usually children advocates, although they have their place when required. We've had a lot of neighbours actually play a big role in the lives of children and families as well. But it's really that extended family network. So you might have 20 people at a conference, and some conferences are small. I've heard of other conferences where they've had 50 people there. Thankfully, not me, because that would be a lot of.
There's some skills in that, even though you're not facilitating it in the way that we would, isn't it? It's still, some awesome skills. This is just sort of showing the notifications around care and protection orders. So they're the orders that may be where there's been investigations and substantiated concerns and the courts get involved and kind of the data. We will make this presentation available and it's got the link, so anyone that's interested will be able to go to the data. This is a really excellent document. It's really looking at best practice for legislators, for program designers, and development around policy, and with the participation, it identifies the benefits of family group conferencing and participation. So again, a really worthwhile document to access and have a look at it, particularly if you are in a program design or development role. It's targeted towards Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, but it would work. There's some insights there if you are working with any other group who have complex or interconnected family relationships that are really relevant. Here's a slide. I got it out of sequence, but the one that asked about what's required to be a family group conference facilitator. I say that there's no nationally accredited training. Some of their trainings, they put units in. There is a private qualification that's owned by Department of Communities and Justice. So I've been asking them often to allow it to be trained, but so far they aren't. There's no training provider that's got permission from them to do it. So it's usually done as certificate training that meets the requirements. That's the way that we've done. But if you've just been working in retail or something, it's probably not the best. It's best if you've got some experience or background as a caseworker, community worker, maybe with working with one of the child protection agencies or education. So people that have been working with children with disability, that's best. So you've got that base there. And then with the training, the way we deliver it is it's got the theory, and then we do, Eve runs a series of 3 half-day sort of online sessions. Now that COVID's over, we are starting to come out and do in-house ones as well. You did one recently with that. So that's always, you can always contact us if that's something that interests you. Does that answer the questions? If anyone else has got any questions about?
Yeah, I think essentially there's no official but if you were to, you do need experience if you're going to go on the panel and get work in family group conferencing in those senses. I think there is, but I do believe that there should be some more firmer accreditations and prerequisites around family group conferencing, because it's really a skill that you sit on top of the other work that you've done, and you utilize all those skills in this.
Yeah. But in the training, you do talk about the risk management and the preparation and all of that sort of thing. It varies, to my understanding. It's not being used anywhere near as much as it should be in Northern Territory and WA. South Australia's doing a bit. Victoria have taken an in-house model you approve of. And we got, I don't know, someone that's in that model was registered. I don't think you're here. I'd love to hear from your thoughts. But anyway, yeah, so it varies around the country of how it's being dealt with. So really what we wanted to talk about was something around the, I suppose, the bridging of practices. I just had some discussion points about what are the opportunities, what are the barriers. I suppose it has more rigour and it has more obligations around it. What could support the FGC? And you raised something, Eve, so maybe some sort of working with children or other checks might be useful rather than just assuming.
I think the way that we can ensure that like best practices are implemented is when we do it ourselves. So I'm always like, okay, how can we make sure that this happens? And you can start a trend. So I'm like, okay, I need to make sure that I give it to people, so then they expect it from somebody else, because I think this is how we start to create some standards in
Yeah, no, that's great. And look, we do have a membership category. So Mediation Institute has a membership category for family group conference facilitators. And we do ask about good character and that sort of thing in the application. And there is a requirement for the DCJ panel that people have an independent complaint handling. Honestly, we've never had a complaint about an FGC facilitator, which is, you must say something about the work that they're doing, which is pretty awesome. And cost is probably a factor as well. Family dispute resolution, it's usually just the 2 parents, so pre-mediation with each, and then 1 or 2 or 3 mediation sessions. But in an FGC, there's a lot of preliminary meetings and preparation, and then the conference, the things usually half day, full day.
Yeah, it's usually you would need an allocation of 20 hours for family group conferencing in total. Yeah, that can go over, it can go under, depending on the family. But in general, that's the general allocation for a DCJ model. And I tend to see that it is that.
Yeah.
20 hours.
Yeah, and I just made a point about data and case studies, but I want to stop the presentation so that we can have a conversation. This report that we mentioned was released, this presentation's available, so you can access that and have a look as well. It's got some information about the evaluation and just with other events. We've got a networking session tonight if anyone wants to come along, and that's just very much a conversation type event. So I'm going to stop the share, and I know that we've got some people with different backgrounds, and I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts and questions. Don't be shy.
I'm going to pop in the chat here the family group conferencing evaluation PDF.
You haven't turned off the recording.
Oh, okay, yes. Maybe I'll turn off the recording and then people will feel comfortable to speak. I was just wondering before I did that, Nicole, were you interested to talking a little bit about what you're working on, or would you rather do that off the recording?
Hi, Joe. Sorry, my IT is really terrible today. This building is like Fort Knox, team. Sorry about that. It takes a while to get out. I'm coming to you from the laptop. So I don't know if you can hear me, Joe.
We can,
Yeah, so sorry. I was talking to Joe, and thanks even Joe for this presentation. I often feel inspired. I jump on and listen again because although I'm trained on a different role at the moment, and to keep skills current and keep inspired by listening to Joe speak, particularly about family group conferencing, and I suppose that's why I went off and researched.
Nicole, your sound is pretty awful. Your sound's pretty awful at the moment.
Yeah.
Do you want to try turning your video off and see if that helps at all?
Is that any better, Joe?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit better.
Sorry, guys. It's like the building is like Fort Knox. It's a secure building, and I think to get signals out is even difficult as well. No, I was just saying to Joanne and Nick, thank you for presenting. You always inspire me to get back into the family group conferencing. It is a passion of mine, but I am working at the moment on setting up a new family time and assessment team. So what we'll be doing is, from a DCJ perspective, bringing back in-house our family contact services. So we have been privatising and we're going to be bringing that back into DCJ space. So I did say to Joe, as information comes out, for those people on the line that are currently studying in New South Wales, there may be employment opportunities to look at as a family time worker to get exposure and experience to family time work. So working with our vulnerable families, not so much in the conferencing space, but as Eve mentioned, in terms of prerequisites and to get on a panel, you would want to have some understanding of working with vulnerable families and families from diverse backgrounds. So as that kind of information comes to light, I'll share with Joanne and Eve and distribute between this network, because there may be opportunities for you to practice what you're learning as well in some respects. But yeah, just enjoy listening, and every time I jump on and listen, then I go off and do something else or look at the panel. But at the moment, I can't practice for FGCs because of conflict. So I'm a current DCJ employee. So I can offer services for non-gov organisations, which might be something that you guys on the line also might be interested in. You can also look at your non-gov providers. So your Life Without Barriers, Barnardo's are often looking for family group conference facilitators, and the similar kind of model that Eve talked about.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, and we'll spread it out. And yeah, Mediation Institute, we're in the process of updating our software, and we're going to be putting out panels soon as well, so that we're able to, it'll make it easier for people to be found. Because I've found that often our family group conference facilitators particularly are not that great at marketing themselves. So finding the work opportunities is really important as well. Thank you. So before I turn the recording off, is there anyone else that I want to say, or I might turn that off and then we can have it at 10 minutes left?